everybody, I'm Beebs Kelley. Welcome back to another video. Today we are taking a look back at some of your top comments. Let's just dive right in. This commenter says, in reference to Meghan and Harry's press and trying to win over the press and how that didn't go very well for them, this person points out that Camilla did it. She had headlines like the most hated woman in Britain and things like that. She was attacked in the media in a really major way, and it was understandable from a lot of perspectives why she was getting such foul press and why the press was really, really hard on her, as well as the public. Could you imagine if we had social media back then, how savage the comment sections would be and the sort of harassment vibes and the bullying vibes towards her would be? A lot of people would say that it was brought on by her own actions, which I'm not going to get into. She is proof that if you do not be petty and not keep aggressively going after the press and the comments and the rumors all of the time, then you can turn around your public image and you can turn around your press coverage. Meghan and Harry continue to get bad press and have dwindling popularity, always on a downward slope, in large part because they refuse to let any of these things go and refuse to move forward in the way that they should, and the way that they probably know that they should. They say only the petty ones never let go of pasts. It works. It does. It works completely. Camilla, you wouldn't know. If you just showed up today and read headlines about Camilla, you would have no idea the exact opposite types of treatments she had and relationships she had with the press back in the day. It was completely opposite to how it is now, and she doesn't act weird about it. She doesn't act butthurt over it. She probably gets it and probably understands and didn't make that a big deal for herself. A lot of it comes down to how you think about it. Sabs McDabs says, forget this one's wife, but Harold has never thought he's done anything wrong. Even with the German uniform, he blamed his brother and sister-in-law. It's never going to happen. He's too arrogant, in response to my suggestion that they apologize publicly for, if nothing else, talking about private family issues in a public setting, because that is one of the main social norms that they broke, that most people think was really, really wrong and inexcusable. And it's very difficult to give somebody a pass when they do that, because if you cannot be vulnerable and trust in the privacy of your own family, then you really are subjecting someone to being very isolated within their family. They don't have anybody they can really talk to and tell things to, because it will go through the grapevine of the family or then be out in public. So it's never good to breach that trust, no matter how large or small the dynamic is. But Harry and Meghan did it on this huge scale that's super inexcusable. And I think this is a really good point. One of the main reasons why Harry and Meghan cannot move forward is because they have never admitted any wrongdoing themselves. Never have we heard them say, I've made a lot of mistakes, or I have made a mistake. They've never said they've made any mistakes ever. In all of their interviews, in all of their news stuff, in all of the things that they have said, and the press and the TV stuff and the interviews with Netflix and stuff, none of it. Not once have they acknowledged any errors or mistakes or misjudgments of any situation, ever. Not once. It would go a long way, that's for sure. In regards to Meghan Markle's poor fashion choices, Holly Berry asks, do you think she tells the designer or seamstress how to fit her? I would think the dress would fit if it were custom made for her, unless that's just difficult through a fit with the fittings. This was a rumor around the time of the wedding that was really circulating a lot leading up to the wedding, was that Meghan was changing things every single time she went in for a fitting. She was asking for different adjustments or different changes to be made and was very nitpicky about the fit of things. The problem is, when you have a seamstress or somebody who is tailoring something to your body, they are doing so with the knowledge of what can and cannot be done successfully with the garment. Sometimes if you want it to be smaller in the armpits, that's just not possible to take it in right here. Or sometimes it's just not going to look right to try to take it in around the waist or things like that. And they have to come up with different ways to do it. And so unless you're practiced in clothing design or making clothes or as a seamstress, you won't know a lot of that. And so it can become a very challenging dynamic if somebody is stepping into that realm when they are not educated on it. And I can totally see Meghan doing that. And it's backed up by the rumors of her being very difficult during her wedding fittings. I think that when it comes to a lot of her outfits, like for example, the red dress, we saw people working on it in person. It's probably that she's making a lot of requests and they are just trying their best to meet those requests. And then over time, the more requests that are made, the more it starts looking like a cut and paste project that's gone horribly wrong. Nat's comment reads, I find it fascinating how she can lie with such dramatic presentation. Do you think she wrote her monologue prior for the Oprah interview? Usually it would be word salad, but her lies each have backup lies. So maybe someone wrote this for her prior. She provided the basis for each lie and then memorized a script. It's just so much more dramatic than necessary and comes across so planned. What do you think? With the Oprah interview, I think that both her and Harry did rehearse some of their talking points beforehand and get their story straight sort of beforehand, because it's clear in retrospect, looking back at it, that they were trying to communicate certain set of things to the royal family with the Oprah interview. They were trying to create excuses for some of their behaviors and choices. That was where the whole mental health crisis came into play, that Meghan was trying to use that to sort of explain away some of her poor choices and her bad behaviors, as well as her more difficult vibe that she had within the royal family. And Harry was trying to explain away their deals with Netflix and Spotify and even the Oprah interview itself, that they had no choice to be able to afford security, that was the only reason why they were taking this path. We know now that a lot of that wasn't true. So then it poses the question, why did they go with those narratives during the Oprah interview? Because they were trying to get the royal family to come back to the negotiation table. They were trying to get the royal family to still bend to them and give them the sort of situation and deal that they wanted. And they weren't getting it any other way. So they tried getting it through this Oprah interview, thinking that it would be dramatic and sensational enough that it would force the hand. So I think they did plan some of this stuff and thought that it would work. But some of the lies, like the we were married 3 days ahead of time, were likely just one of those things that self-centered narcissistic people tend to do. An unnecessary lie just for the sake of making something seem special or dishing gossip in some way, shape, or form. Because the way she said that scene, even where she's like, a lot of people don't even know this, and she makes it really dramatic, as you say in this comment, because she's trying to stir up some sort of a juicy story to share. And that's the whole reason for the lie. And you have to remember that people like that have no problem with making lies and saying them and throwing them about willy-nilly, because they have a very different relationship to reality and to lies, and they like to think about things the way they like to think about it, and it doesn't really matter if it's true or not. So they have a much more muted filter when it comes to those sorts of things. Jay says, Oprah interview aside, I bet William is glad Harry is out of his life. My guess is that Harry has always been a problem. People like that often pair up with other people that seem worse and actually hide their bad behaviors. Fair. And I think that looking back objectively, there was a lot of signs of Harry being more challenging within his relationships with the royal family and having a lot more blunders publicly. He has since tried to make it seem like he was just blamed for things or that they would put out false stories. None of that is true. All of that is nonsense. Harry did things and the palace tried to put a spin on it or push it away a little bit or just didn't comment on it, and it fizzled out really quickly. He did lots of negative things. And looking at it through the perspective of how he has behaved since leaving the royal family with Spare and things like that, you see his past actions, like his German Halloween costume or his aggressiveness when he plays polo or his sort of pouty demeanor at certain outings and certain events. You can now view those things in a very different light, that this person was very petulant and challenging to deal with all of the time and made a lot of sort of short-sighted, stupid mistakes that shouldn't have happened and created a lot of problems within the dynamics of the royal family or the monarchy in general long before Meghan came on the scene. S. O'Brien says, problem with Meghan is that she did not take the same stance as Mike Tyndall and treat the royals as nicely as they tried to treat her, and everyone will get along fine. Why else would she go out of her way to try and grab headlines when there is a major headline with the real royals? Very true. As we've discussed at length, a lot of the petty press games and trying to steal the limelight and things like that they do now simply back up the vibe that people were getting off of them from the start. That Meghan wasn't really trying. She didn't ever extend a decent amount of courtesy and grace towards these people. Oftentimes people who are higher in narcissism see things very much only from their perspective and only in one way. Meghan felt she wasn't being treated as fairly as she wanted to be. She felt she was being pushed to second place. She felt she wasn't they weren't coming to her to ask her to be involved. They weren't coming to her to talk with her or ask her things, or didn't want to hear from her about stuff, where in reality, she wasn't in a position to have it be that way at all. And it's always a two-way street. She clearly didn't extend very much of an effort. Everybody in these dynamics needs to make efforts. And when you look at things now, when you look back at things, it's very obvious that Meghan didn't put out very many efforts towards the royals. You can't think of a time where it was like, oh, she really stuck her neck out and tried to, make something nice. Even when she did that cover, that magazine cover, she guest edited, what was it, Vogue or Vanity Fair? She guest edited. And she didn't place the Queen or Catherine Princess of Wales or anybody like that on the cover of these, powerful women and game changers or something like that. She didn't mention them at all. She never said anything about them. She could have even if they declined to be on the cover, she could have at least mentioned them and acknowledged the powerful figure that Queen Elizabeth was and the role model that she was and the great example that she set and the steady presence and the reassuring force that she was for the country. She could have at least acknowledged that as something important, but she didn't. It was like Meghan never threw a bone the other way. Kathleen asks, how do you feel about Donald Trump's tie length? I feel like it's too long, but I think if it ended where his shirt ends, then it might shorten his torso and bring unwanted attention to his midsection. So because he carries weight in his belly area, a longer tie makes more sense than a shorter tie because you don't want it stopping too early because that will become more of a focal point. So yes, he wears his tie longer than most, but it is likely because of the midsection area. Back to the Oprah interview, this commenter says, this may seem petty, but her look has always bothered me in this interview. Something just seems off and she doesn't look like her real self. Maybe it is how over the top the black silky dress with heels are to hide her body or make her seem very veiled. Her eyes are also so overdone, plus her makeup so that you can't read any of her facial expressions or her eyes. Later, when she's lying about the private wedding ceremony, she looks more normal in the face again, but then she can hide behind the animals or other things so you can't fully see or read her face then either. She still doesn't seem to move, act, or talk like someone who had 2 geriatric pregnancies. I've been around a large amount of women going through geriatric ones, and she just doesn't seem to match what I've seen in them. I have no opinion on that so much, but her appearance in the Oprah interview, I think, was very calculated. I think she did a lot of that on purpose, and she made a lot of those choices on purpose to create a little bit of a barrier, because obviously she would have gone into it knowing that she was going to say falsehoods, exaggerate things, manipulate the truth, change the context of things, and flat out lie as well. She would have known she was planning to do that, and even if without realizing it subconsciously, she would have likely created more of a mask and more bordering or sort of boundary sort of gestures would have come out in her styling. And so I think that the eye makeup and the choice of clothes were definitely part of that. I also think that, once again, it was a miscalculation in her styling and whatnot. Not having anything sort of soft, well, the fabric was soft, but it was a black color, and the pattern was almost like spiky, sort of strange flower pattern that a lot of people think looks like splatter, it didn't convey a softness. And while her hairstyle was a little bit softer, it still closed off a lot of her face. I think she would have come across better and created a better connection with the audience if she did take the approach of being softer, in a lighter color, in a fabric that was a little bit softer, or a nicer pattern, something a little bit more feminine, a little bit more welcoming and open looking, and to not close off her eyes with all that dark makeup and the hair near her eyes as well would have helped, because it just added to the feel and the vibe of deception, her look in the Oprah interview for sure. Pamela points out that the wedding ceremony of Harry and Meghan, the flowers, wedding dress, and receptions, including the bride's mother's outfit, were all paid for by Charles. The policing and security in the streets were paid for by the British taxpayer. No wonder Charles told his son no more after Meghan frittered away more money on her clothes than it cost for all the royal women together during less than 2 years she was in the UK. Moreover, when they left, Charles gave them approximately £2 million to allow them to settle abroad for their first year, contrary to Harry's claim that his father had cut him off financially when they went to Canada, yet no gratitude was shown by either of these two. Another great point of one of the major mistakes Harry and Meghan have made. While they have occasionally acknowledged their privilege in life, they don't show gratitude for what the royal family has done for them and has given them, and what Charles did for them and gave them. It's always talking about the negatives, the unfairness, the pulling of security. All of these things are constantly viewed in a negative light that just doesn't do Harry any favors, or Meghan, because people are not stupid, and they know at least the loose bones of the story. People know that he's a prince. People know that they worked with the royals and got money and had money from the start. And for most people, getting $2 million or £2 million, whichever it was, is enough to set yourself up really, really nicely if you're just smart about it. And so people will never have any degree of understanding for Harry and Meghan when it comes to discussing the financials as if they were hard done by. It's just never going to happen. And that harkens back to Harry and Meghan's complete and utter lack of self-awareness that has gotten them into this mess time and time again, and constantly causes problems for themselves because they are never willing to see things objectively the way the rest of the world does. But leave it in the comments what you think. Thank you so much for joining me for today's little recap video covering some of your top comments. As always, thank you so very much for your comments. I always appreciate it and enjoy the chance to make a video featuring your feedback and your opinions. Thank you again. I hope you have a happy day ahead, and I will see you next time. Bye.